The history of medieval times is very popular with many people. Many people even fantasize about being transported back to those days. Now, we're not saying that these people are crazy, but there is no way they would last a single day during those times. Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going to be looking at 5 reasons why you wouldn't last a day in medieval times. Make sure to watch each one, because the last reason will definitely surprise you. So let's get started. No. 5. The air quality. People nowadays are very concerned with the air quality around them, especially with everything that's going on. Well, compared to now, the air quality in medieval times was horrible. During the Middle Ages, the population of the world was around 350 million people. But by the end of the 18th century, that number had grown to over 1 billion people. That's a huge increase in people within a few hundred years. And with more people comes more pollution. To make matters worse, during the Middle Ages, most of the population lived in cities. People did not have cars, but they did have other means of transportation, such as horses. So imagine how bad the air quality must have been. On top of that, people didn't know much about germs and hygiene. So some things that you could see lying around may not have been too pleasant to breathe in. Also, during the Middle Ages, wood burning was very common. It was used for heating homes, cooking food, and powering industries. Burning wood produces smoke, which contains harmful gases and particles. Over time, this has a negative effect on our health. In fact, today it is estimated that indoor air pollution from solid fuels is responsible for over 4 million deaths every year. So if you couldn't breathe clean air, there is no way you would last a day in medieval times. Number 4. Diseases and plagues. Even though the life expectancy during the Middle Ages wasn't exactly great, that doesn't mean that people were trying to live their best lives. And what's the best way to do that? By starting a family. Sadly, most children didn't make it past the age of 5, and only half of all adults would survive their decade. So if you were to somehow manage to live through your first day in medieval times, you might think that you're in the clear. But you'd actually be very wrong. If you were to catch any kind of disease, chances are you wouldn't make it. For example, during the Middle Ages, a bacterial infection known as the plague swept across Europe, Asia, and Africa. This killed around 25 million people, which is about half of the population. It's also known as the Black Death. The plague was spread by fleas that lived on rats. It spread quickly and killed people very fast. Some people say that the plague actually helped to end the Middle Ages. The plague had 3 different types: bubonic, pneumonic, and septicemic. The bubonic type was the most common. Symptoms included painful swellings in the lymph nodes, fever, chills, and weakness. If this type was left untreated, it would lead to death within a week. Then there was the pneumonic type, which was the worst out of the 3. It affected the lungs and was spread through the air. This type was extremely rare, but it was fatal every time. Finally, there was the septicemic type. This type was caused by bacteria that entered the bloodstream. This led to bleeding, organ failure, and eventually death. So if you somehow managed to avoid the plague, you'd still be at risk of dying from something else. There were many other diseases during the Middle Ages, such as smallpox, the measles, cholera, and the flu. All of these are very contagious and can easily take your life. Plus, during the Middle Ages, there weren't many cures for diseases. Most treatments were useless, and sometimes even dangerous. Doctors usually didn't wash their hands before treating patients, so they would often make things worse. So if you managed to avoid getting a disease, you probably wouldn't be able to avoid death. No. 3. Sanitation. It's no secret that during the Middle Ages, sanitation was not a priority for most people. Most people lived in filth and didn't know anything about germs. They believed that bad air was the cause of most diseases. The word sanitation may sound complicated, but it's basically just a fancy way of saying keeping your environment clean. During the Middle Ages, sanitation was very lacking. For example, sewage systems were non-existent. So people would simply throw their waste out the window. They would also use the streets as toilets. The waste would pile up and create an awful stench. Not only was it disgusting, but it was also dangerous. The waste would attract rats and stray dogs. On top of that, there were no trash cans, so people would just leave their trash in the streets. Rubbish would pile up and rot away. Flies would be attracted to the rubbish, and then they would carry diseases into people's homes. To make things worse, there was no running water in most places. People had to use wells and rivers for drinking water, but that water was also used for cleaning. So you can imagine how dirty it was. Most people didn't bathe very often. Sometimes they would go months without bathing. It wasn't uncommon for people to have lice, fleas, and other parasites. So if you want to survive a day in medieval times, you need to keep yourself clean. But don't bother showering because there's no hot water. Instead, you'll need to wipe yourself down with a wet cloth. And please be careful where you throw your garbage because it could attract unwanted guests. No. 2. Food and water. As we've already mentioned, sanitation was lacking during the Middle Ages. Because of this, food and water were often contaminated. You never knew what you were going to get when you ate or drank. For example, milk could be mixed with dirt and urine. Meat could be filled with parasites. And vegetables could be growing in human waste. Plus, most people were lactose intolerant, but they still drank milk. So if you plan on traveling back to medieval times, you should bring plenty of Imodium. Another thing you need to watch out for is food poisoning. Back then, there were no refrigerators to keep food fresh, so most of it went bad. Rotten food could easily give you food poisoning, and if you were a peasant, you would have no way of treating it. Also, during the Middle Ages, famine was very common. If there was a bad harvest, people would have to eat whatever they could find. Some people resorted to eating grass and leaves. Starvation was also a big problem. Many people starved to death because they didn't have enough food. And finally, there was a lack of nutrients. During the Middle Ages, people didn't get the right nutrients they needed. Their diets consisted mostly of bread, cheese, and meat. Unfortunately, none of these foods are high in nutrients. Most people were deficient in vitamins and minerals. Women and children suffered the most. A lack of nutrients made them very weak and sick. So if you plan on traveling back to medieval times, you're gonna need more than Imodium. You're gonna need some Pepto. Number 1. Life as a peasant. Imagine living in a small, dirty village. You don't have any of the luxuries that you have now, such as electricity, Wi-Fi, and a smartphone. You have to walk everywhere because there are no cars. You have to cook all of your meals over an open fire. Your food is bland, and you have no idea where it came from. Your water is dirty, and you have no idea if it's safe to drink. There is a plague going around that kills people in a matter of days. You have no way to defend yourself against it. You wear dirty clothes that have been passed down for generations. Your house is made out of wood and straw. At night you sleep in a bed with bugs and parasites. You work long hours, and you have nothing to show for it. You can't read or write. You have no idea what's going on in the outside world. This was the daily life of the average peasant during the Middle Ages. Peasants were at the bottom of society. They worked long hours for little pay. Their lives were hard and dangerous. They were always hungry and thirsty. They didn't know how to read or write. They had no rights. They couldn't change their social class. They were poor, dirty, and uneducated. So if you traveled back to medieval times, chances are you would be a peasant. And honestly, who would want that? Thanks for watching. Do you think you could survive a day in medieval times? Comment below. And, as always, thanks for watching, and see you next time.